Today is a very, very, very important and special day. We're going to be talking about a topic that is very current and very important, and that is racism. And I have two incredibly special people in the studio with me today. My two son-in-laws, Ellie and Jay. And I am so honored and privileged to be their mother-in-law, and they are amazing, incredible men, and they have achieved so much in their lives. And I cannot tell you how proud I am of both of them. And they have they've taught me so much. And when it comes to this whole concept of racism, I couldn't think of two better people to talk to. So welcome, Ellie and Jay.
Thank you.
I'm so pleased to have you guys with me today. It's such an honor. Very, very special to me. And thank you for being prepared to talk about a very difficult topic in this very crazy time that we're in. So can we start by each of you just telling us a little bit about you, about yourselves and your background? So if we can maybe start with you, Ellie?
Oh, sure. So, I am an LA native. Part of my family is originally from Nigeria, but I was born in Los Angeles, and I've lived pretty much my whole life in the Southern California area. Graduated from college in Southern California as an engineering major, and then got into the tech field with a variety of different companies. And then, a few years ago, I met my soon-to-be wife, Jessica, and we got married in September 2018. And then just a few months ago, we moved up to Seattle, Washington, for a new job opportunity at a tech company up here. So that's where we're at right now, trying to, keep things going.
And we were just with you this weekend, and we were watching the riots literally from your building. Yeah. So we've been immersed in that, right? As this has been happening, we've been seeing.
Indeed. We've been witnessing the situation live. It's not just been on TV, it's been outside of our window. So it really is a real experience for all of us.
It's very, very real, this. Jay, tell us a bit about you and your background.
Yeah, so I am born and raised in Ohio. I spent, I want to say, about 22 years there. I've always been a bit of a tech geek and a quiet kid. But when I was 22, I made a last minute decision to move to Arizona to kickstart my career a bit. And from there, for the past few years, I've spent, working with different organizations, large or small, and leading IT departments across various states in the U.S. Most recently, I took a position at a company that is international and made the move over to New York because of the state of the world that sort of took me and us back to California, where it's a bit more comfortable, but luckily I'm a family man. I've got a husband, and I've got 3 fur babies.
I got grandbabies.
Yeah,
fur grandbabies.
Yeah, and I live a good life. Life is good.
Oh, well, I just, take my hat off to both of you, because you both have had experiences that none of us can actually relate to. And it's just, that's what I wanted to share today is how do we. Let's talk about your experiences. Can you talk about your lives and your experiences as African-American men? What that means, what that looks like living in the US today, where we supposedly are not supposed to be racist.
Yeah. Ellie, do you want to start, or I can jump in?
I mean, yeah, sure. I'll start. I mean, I guess for me, well, obviously both of us have unique experiences, because not only are we, Black men, but we're, successful Black men. And we've lived in environments that are not necessarily the same as a lot of Black men experience, but we still have had experiences that are unique to Black men. And for me, I guess the most visceral experience that made me realize that racism is a thing was, being arrested or handcuffed at gunpoint in high school. Now, for most of my life, I lived in mostly white neighborhoods, because my parents could afford to, unlike many Black families. And most of these neighborhoods, really were about, equality and respected me and didn't treat me any different than anybody else. So I didn't experience a lot of overt discrimination in school or in my neighborhood. But so it came to my first real encounter with police that I felt the first real sense of discrimination. And that was in the 10th grade when I was waiting outside school, waiting to get picked up by my mom. And I see a fight across the street, two black guys, and it looked like some white and some Mexican guys were fighting with each other. And eventually the black guys ran away. Police came a few minutes later, and I'm watching this from the opposite side of the street, wondering what's going on. Then one of the police cars drives the wrong direction across the street towards me. The two cops out of the car, and they say, "Freeze, get your hands up." And both of them pointing their guns at me. And I'm just like, I was just like in a complete state of shock. I thought maybe they thought that one of the assailants was over next to me, but no, they were pointing at me. And so I immediately, instinctively, like put my hands up. They said, "Get down on the floor." I got down on the floor, and then they came over and put my hands behind my back, handcuffed me, and then put me in the police car. And I'm just thinking, like, is this like a movie or something? I can't believe this is happening. And then, from then on, they start driving around the neighborhood asking me, "Oh, do I know what's happened?" I'm like, this is insane. I'm not involved in any games. I'm a freaking honor student. My backpack is still like sitting there where you guys, pull me off the ground. I have no idea what's going on. I couldn't even speak at the time. I was in such shock. But they had it in their mind that I must be involved because I'm Black and I was near the scene of the fight. And so then, they pulled over to where two of the victims in the fight were, and asked them, "Oh, does this guy look familiar?" And thank God they were honest and said no. And so then they let me out of the car and said, "Hey, we're going to unhandcuff you now," and basically yelled at me to get to my hands on the car. So they unhandcuffed me. And then they said, like, "Now do us a favor and get out of here." And that was the end of it. It was like, it's like one of those things that you see in like those crime dramas, but you don't think it's really happening to you. And like at that very same moment, my mom comes to pick me up, and I tell her, or rather my stepmom comes to pick me up. I tell her everything that happened, and she's just like, it's just blowing her mind. And it just was really a wide open world wide open welcome to being what it means to be a Black adult, really. And so, I guess for racism, that's like when I think about it, that's what I think about. That's what I thought about when, in the murder of George Floyd, and everybody's response to that. And then looking at the cycle of police violence over the decades, with whether, it's Mike Brown or Philando Castile, or so many names that have not been atoned for. And it just reminds me that I could have been one of those names, and no one would have remembered me because there was no video evidence to prove what really happened. I have no doubt that the police would have said, "Oh, he was reaching for a gun." If I made a sudden move, they would say, he was reaching for a gun, or we thought he had a gun, blah, blah. And then, my name wouldn't not be remembered by anybody. So I guess on the tech side, that's one benefit that we have of living in 2020, is that we're all armed with the ability to record what police are doing. And I think that's why a lot of these stories are coming out. It's just revealing, pulling the sheet away from what's always been happening. So now everybody can see that this is not right. This is not right.
Listen to that, and my heart's like palpitating. The fear that you're living under, that constant fear, and what could have happened. I mean, when that whole George Floyd thing went down, my first reaction was, this could have been one of my son-in-laws. It really hit home. And just the other night, Ellie, when you were actually moving your bike in because of the protests, and you went downtown to go and see what was going on, Jessica and I were both freaking out that don't go there. And she was texting you to come back. This is, we are your mother-in-law and your wife, and we were panicking, and we can't even begin to understand that you guys are living under this constant threat. This is no words to even process what you've gone through.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Justin, do you want to talk about your?
Yeah, for
Jay.
sure. Before it's okay. Before, let me know if this video is coming through because
Yeah,
you
it's
guys
coming
got
through.
choppy for a second.
Oh, did
Okay.
it? No, it's coming through perfectly. So, Jay, tell us your experience.
Yeah. So, I think a large part of my life, I was really unaware, be it, blissfully or sort of ignorantly unaware of how different, I was to everyone around me. I mean, very much like Ellie, I grew up in a predominantly Caucasian neighborhood. And it didn't really register to me because it's all that I knew. I knew that my skin was different from my friends, at an early age, but I had friends. We went out and we played and everything was just fine. What I came to realize sort of as I was getting older is that I would have all the rules that all of my friends had to abide by, and then when I went home, I would have a second set of rules that my mom would let me know that I had to follow to make sure that I was safe. And I just did so, right? I knew how I should address, an adult, or if I saw a police officer, what I should do, or how I should act when I'm in a store or in a public setting to make sure people don't view me in a specific light. That's how I spent majority of my life. And I follow that, because just that's what you do. You pay attention to your parents and you be a good kid.
Yeah.
And then sort of as time went on, I think the disparities became a little bit more prevalent. I grew up, we certainly were not affluent as a family. My mom was a single mom. She supported 3 kids and she did a great job at it. But I got to see like how different, my life was from a financial aspect from the rest of my friends. And that was largely based on opportunities that were presented to our family. And then taking it even a step further, I remember one day my mom had a conversation with me because I had 3 best friends at the time. And she said, I'm happy for you and it seems great, but just be on the lookout. If you ever make one of your friends upset, they may say something to you that you don't want to hear. And I thought, I don't know what she's talking about, and that probably would never happen to me. These people understood me; they were my friends. And lo and behold, one day I pissed off one of my friends while we were playing. I don't even know what, and then they dropped the N-word and called to me, and I was sort of taken aback. And it was the clearest indicator that there was a difference between me and them with that single word. And then from that point on, I think the rest of my K through 12 experience was really just feeling like another, like outside the mainstream. I spent a lot of my time in my high school years sort of looking in the mirror and sort of thinking that my own appearance was not, what somebody else would want. I felt ugly. I used to spend my time in the mirror, daydreaming about what plastic surgery I was going to get done to my face to make me look, more Eurocentric, basically. And then you sort of you do that, and your self-esteem is sort of broken down. And then as I started to take on more adult responsibilities, right? I got my driver's license. I got a job. I started making money for myself. The disparities became clear. I mentioned this in my blog post. I've been pulled over, at least a dozen plus times before, never been given a speeding ticket. But, I can tell you the multitude of reasons why living in a neighborhood that is predominantly Caucasian, when you're one of the only African-American or people of color in the neighborhood, makes you look suspicious to law enforcement officers. I've been pulled over because I was told my taillight was out and it wasn't. I've been pulled over because I was told that I was speeding and I wasn't. I've been pulled over because I was told that I simply looked nervous when I was driving, which I probably was. With a cop behind me, I've had a car full of friends where we've all been forced out of the car and had the car searched with multiple dogs and all been searched for no reason, just because. And I think part of my experience and what I imagine is part of the Black experience is you've got that sort of tough exterior. You've got the resilience, because this is something that is going to happen to you, and this is something that you just need to sort of prepare yourself for and move on, because you still have to live a life and you still need to be successful. I could go on. I think there are a million other examples that I could as well. But skipping forward into my adult life, I think the biggest thing that I've always realized is people make a concerted effort and have made a concerted effort in my life to make me feel like I'm, just like everyone else. But the concept in the word microaggression has become something that is very, that I've become very aware of in my later adult years now, because you see the differences, right? I'm a vice president of technology. I've been working in IT for 16 years now. And what I found was, not ever being a part of that small group. Everyone talks about the boys club. It applies to you if you are a woman. It applies to you if you are a person of color as well. That boys club is filled with, white men, and not looking like or sort of assimilating into that culture, sets you outside of it, and it caps the amount of success that you have. So you can just imagine how hard it is to sort of climb and attain sort of what I have. So I'm rambling, but basically,
no, you're not. It's very relevant.
Yeah, and so basically, this has been life. So the last part that I do want to mention is, when you think about finding a significant other, when you think about finding a spouse, like or someone to love and who loves you, that has been a journey in itself. I think because I didn't necessarily know if I was cute or not until I went to college. I remember someone wrote on my dry erase board outside the door, like, "Oh, I think you're cute." And that was the first time I'd ever heard it in my entire life from anyone in the world. And it was, it was wild. And you go through this whole sort of process where you doubt yourself, and you have people who are not only fetishizing you because of the color of your skin and who you are, but also people who are judging you and wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole because of the same reason. And it's very exhausting as well, trying to figure out where you fit, because you come from a predominantly white neighborhood, so you don't act like what people think Black people should act like. But at the same time, the very people from the place where you come from also don't want you. So that has been, a challenge as well. So, I've been very, very fortunate, very blessed to find someone who loves me, and I'm very happy with that. To sort of round it up and end it off, when I see what's happening in the world right now, I'm really sad to say that it doesn't surprise me, because elements of what's happening are things that I think both Ellie and I have experienced firsthand. Thank God, not to the fullest extent that unfortunately many people who have experienced injustice through the legal system or directly from police officers have, but things that are happening every day. So the thing that comforts me is that now I feel like people are paying attention. Now I feel like people can see it because, like you mentioned, technology is being videoed. It's not something that can be argued, and they want to do something about it. But it's clear and it's nothing new to us. And there's a part of me that's very skeptical, yet hopeful that there will be change. Is this going to be just another hashtag that goes on for a couple of weeks, dissipates, and then things go back into normal because there's less effort to continue what we're doing? Or is this something that's going to actually change? And I honestly don't know. But that's me.
You said so much there, both of you. That's just, there's things like you said, things like mental exhaustion, from living like that, being hopeful, but also skeptical if this is going to last. How, Ellie, it wasn't filmed, so you could have just disappeared. I mean, how many haven't been seen? You both said things like it's, you've been, now we can hear through technology, but it's like that to hear your story, to actually hear what about all the how many hundreds of thousands that haven't been seen and haven't been heard, and how do we keep this going, this awareness that is brewing at the moment and coming to a head? How do we take this and keep it in our conscious minds so that we can move into the future and finally start changing this? Before we dive into that sort of area, I want to just talk about the mental health aspect, the mental exhaustion that you must be living under, because constant pressure. I mean, you guys know that I do mind-brain research, and I look inside brains and I look at what is happening when we're under constant stress. And I know that a person anxiety is a normal human experience. We all have it, and it goes up and down. but being in a constant state where you're constantly on edge, where you have to be on edge all the time, like living in a perpetual state of on edge, that doesn't do good stuff in the brain. So, and for mental health, can we talk about that? Do you feel like you live like that? And if you do, what does it feel like, and how do you manage it?
That's an excellent question, Caroline. And, I really appreciate you asking it. I feel like for me, I don't, even though, that the incident I previously described was really intense, it's not something that I've carried with me like a burden where I'm always looking over my back. And maybe that's just because of my personality or to not hold on to things. But at the same time, there is this, the concept that does come to my mind from time to time that, like, what is freedom? That's the freedom that white people can have to demand change in their government. It's not exactly the freedom that Black people can have. And one thought of mine in the past is, people talking about, okay, well, look, if you've been pulled over unjustly, there's actually, if you actually look at the law, there's things you can do to be able to contest, a police officer who's trying to harass you, basically. But those tools, even though they may be legal, they're not really accessible to Black people, because as soon as somebody who's Black is going to, say something that might upset a police officer, you never know what's going to happen next. So I would never try anything that I'm even legally entitled to try half the time. So I guess that's for me, that's the consciousness that I think of in terms of being nervous or being anxious about, what it means to be Black in a community that doesn't understand you, or it doesn't understand your experience. And I feel like that, but that being said, I've been super blessed, and I really feel bad for a lot of Black people who live in underprivileged communities, who live in the projects, who live in the ghettos, and have to get pulled over, multiple times every year for no good reason. Or in New York, the most horrible thing is this whole stop and frisk policy in New York. Is like, forget about driving while Black, it's just walking while Black. And cops are going to come up to you and make you basically strip search you in the middle of the street for nothing, And now it's come out that, the cops have come on the record and said, yeah, where I was told by my superiors, Black men 14 to 20, those are the ones you need to stop and frisk. And there's quota systems around that. It's like, I'd feel like I was in a zombie movie if I lived in Brooklyn or something, and so I really feel for the people that are in those circumstances where they really do have to look over their shoulder every 5 minutes because they don't know who's coming after them.
I mean, just to mention that, you mentioned a quota system, that there's a quota system for how many to frisk at a certain time. I mean, this is that's dehumanizing. That's not even, that's to live with that. I mean, Jay, you moved to New York and then COVID hit and you moved back to LA now, but you were there and you you couldn't get out, but how did you feel? Did you in New York? All over. I mean, I'm sure it's everywhere. This is not just a New York thing. That's an everywhere thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about New York, and then I'll answer your question as well. So, yeah. So being in New York was obviously a brief experience, and I'll certainly will be back. I mean, that's my employer is there. The thing that was different about New York is that I probably saw a cop a block. It's very different. It's a very condensed city. You hear sirens on a daily basis all throughout the day. There are folks who are homeless or individuals shouting in the middle of the street. It's just a different culture entirely. And I imagine, just to be completely fair, that the individuals out there, like the cops and just regular people, are constantly on edge. There's no way not to be. There's just so many noises and smells and things. It's extremely overwhelming. So though I was not sort of subjected to any type of direct injustice while I was there, even people around me would mention, oh man, like that cop was staring at you, and that person was staring at you I think people look in fear, not only because, I love to walk around in hoodies and snapback caps all day, but just because I think everyone was on edge. And I think that really sort of leans into what my overall life experience has been. I mean, I think by and large, I want to give credit to my mom, because I think everything that she did, from the day I was born and on, was set to give me as many tools as she possibly could on her end to make sure I was set up for success. My legal name is what it is. I think because, my mom wanted to make sure, and I know because we joked around about this, wanted to make sure that if my name showed up on our caller ID or on an application, that someone wouldn't immediately turn me away, unjustifiably. And that's a real thing. The way in which I speak, the way in which, I carry myself, especially in the professional setting, I learned from my mom, and these are the things that have allowed me to be successful in life. I cannot tell you the number of times to this day I hear, "Oh, you are so well spoken. Oh, you are so eloquent." It's just, it just happens. And one end, like,
it's almost insulting though, but it's almost insulting in a way, isn't it?
It's almost because on one day, I want to say thank you, because yes, I am. And,
yeah.
And then secondly, you want to say, like, what made you want to say that to me, as opposed to the many other people that I'm sure are around you who speak in a way that is just as eloquent as I, if not more. So, those are the things that make you feel a little uncomfortable. But to Ellie's point, I live, as far as I know, for now, one life, and I'm trying to have the best one that I possibly can. So you try not to hold on to these things so close to the chest on a daily basis. Like, I want to enjoy my life. I want to enjoy the sunshine, the things I have to do, the things that I've been fortunate enough to have. My mom taught me at an early age to be grateful for the blessings that I was given. But not everyone who had all the same opportunities that I had, and of course the people who did not as well. So, I try to live in gratitude and just not have that stuff focus on me. But there have been situations where you feel that sense of dread immediately, and you're either sort of quickly reminded of the color of your skin in a way where it's like, man, it's really like that, or in a way which terrifies you. I mean, I still get nervous when I'm driving and there's a police cop behind me. It's instinctual now to think, what reason now am I going to be the next person, who I've seen on the news, either be assaulted or murdered for reasons unknown. In addition to that, you go into a store and you see someone, glance at you in a way, and only you, in a way, because they were, and you have to think of, what are the things that I can do to sort of diffuse the situation? Let me say a couple of words to this person and greet them so they know that I am safe. Once they hear my voice and they hear that I'm friendly, I've seen plenty of times, I'll see someone look me in the eye, and if I'm not giving them a happy smile, you can tell they're on edge. We went for a road trip a few days ago, just up into the mountains. I'm terrible at geography, and we stopped to go and get coffee, and I wanted to get an ice cream, and it was an area that was, probably 100% white. And when we walked out of the car, we were both wearing the same thing, sweatpants, hoodie, and a hat. Boy, that whole scene could have frozen, and everyone stood and looked at me, because I think they were thinking that I was about to pull out a sign and start protesting and looting the area that they were in right now. So that's just the life that you live, or that I live, and that I think a lot of people.
But they didn't look at Jeffrey. Sorry to interrupt you. They didn't look at Jeffrey, but they looked at you.
Yeah. I noticed immediately while people were talking. They all were talking, and their eyes went straight to me. And they just sort of followed me, and everyone got really, really silent to see what it is that I was going to do, if anything. And they watched me until we got back in the car and left. And that's just life. Now, there are plenty of situations where that doesn't happen. I think, we're both lucky enough to live in an era where people who are our age, by and large, I want to say maybe, don't exhibit those behaviors, on the outset. But internally, it's those little things that make you feel like you are an other. So that's just in life.
You said something there, both of you said things that have really touched me, and I know touching everyone, but you said this is life, but it shouldn't be life, because what you've both described are situations where there's difference shouldn't be a value judgment. Statement that I often make, and it is they're making difference a value judgment, and you've both kind of indicated in different ways that you almost your identity is being questioned. You know, who your value as a person has been questioned through the color of your skin by just people looking at you, the way that or following the police following you. You're driving, you're going to work, you're going to dinner, and you feel on edge when there's a police car behind you, but I'm not going to feel that. And people have made value judgments. So this is why you have to talk, and this is why we have to share your stories, because we've got to keep this in conscious awareness, because you guys know that the work that I do with the brain, that if something is in the non-conscious mind, you can't change it. And that's what white privileged people have to do. We have to bring into consciousness what we don't even think is there. Because so many times we'll think, oh, I'm not racist. I've got 2 African-American son-in-laws and whatever. But there's stuff. I grew up in apartheid South Africa, where when I was a little girl, there was black and white toilets, black and white beaches. There were signs. That's what I grew up with. And I came against that system as a young adult and worked in those, as you know, I worked in those systems for 25 years, trying to change the systems and but I saw the results of racial discrimination. I saw what it did to communities. And now I come to America and I'm seeing exactly the same thing. It's just like it's more, you said earlier on, it's more like passive aggressive, but it's not it's passive aggressive constantly, but and then there's these explosions that are constantly happening. And that's got to change. It's time. Yep. I mean, and unless something's conscious, and that's why I'm so grateful for this season, which has made us aware. I'm grateful for technology. I'm grateful that we can talk. I'm grateful that you two can dig down deep like you are and bring up very painful experiences. We need to hear everyone's stories. We need to keep it in our conscious mind, because science shows that only when something is conscious, when you bring that thought that's physically structured into your brain, when you bring that into your conscious awareness, you can then change it. And there's been times when my own 4 children, and you married to 2 of them, have said, hey, Mom, that's a racist statement. I didn't even know. And that's what we have to do. If I think of myself and everyone who's white, who's listening to this, we need to not just think consciously. Yes, consciously you may think you're not being racist, but what is deep down inside of you? What are the cultural, structural, societal norms that you've grown up with that are imprinted in your psyche? Those need to come up, and we need to dismantle those one at a time. And we can't do that if we're not conscious, if we're not listening with empathy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We have to listen, but sometimes the first part of listening is asking the question, because most people are not comfortable talking about the experience they've had. In fact, what I just told you about being arrested at gunpoint, most of my friends don't know about that. It's not like, oh, I'm afraid to tell anybody. It's that partially it's not on my consciousness all the time. And secondly, I don't want, I don't want to make people feel like I'm, behaving like I'm a victim, because I don't see myself as a victim personally. But when you ask me, well, then now I'm going to bring it up. We're in this environment where, of course, it's on my mind. Then I'm going to bring it up because it needs to be said. And so I think people need to ask more questions of who don't understand. They need to ask the questions. And people who do understand need to speak out about their experiences and have the courage to be like, yeah, this happened to me. It's not just an outlier. It's not just a random act of violence. It is a way of life. And now you need to know that it didn't just happen on TV, that your son-in-law experienced this, your friend, your classmate, your brother, that guy that you knew for years, that was just like you, but he's Black. Well, he's not just like you because he has totally different experience that you had no idea about. And so I think we need to get comfortable with that.
We need to go ahead, Jay. Go ahead, Jay.
No. Yeah, I was going to sort of mirror that and simply say, what we see in the world right now, isn't just people of color, Black people, and allies, getting enraged simply because of George Floyd. It's because of years of watching people, be murdered unjustly, and going peacefully about, reposting a hashtag and a photo and bringing awareness and hoping for justice, and it not coming again and again and again. And now you've got people who are just like, I'm tired of talking about this with you. I'm tired of trying to explain it peacefully. I'm tired of you telling me that I'm not, raising my voice or protesting in the correct way. I'm upset, and you're going to have to hear that. So I think, there definitely needs to be some understanding from people who not only are not aware of what it is that's going on because their privilege or their own experience has allowed them to not have to experience it, taking the time to understand what that difference is, and then also taking the time to try and empathize with people who are, who have lived this experience for their entire life, and try and recognize how they feel, and sort of take it from there. Because, at this point, we've sort of popped the top, and the state of the world is what it is. And, we're looking for some justice, and we're looking for some real change. But that dialogue, when we do have an opportunity to have it, really needs to be one of, listening, to people who have these grievances, and have this hurt inside them, and try to understand it from their perspective.
Very good. Both of what you've both said is incredibly good. And when you think about, you pop the lid in terms of the brain and the mind, thoughts are real. So the thoughts that I've grown up with that have been imprinted, the experiences that you've had that have been, and these years of racial injustice, and not just, as you say, it's not just George Floyd and these few people we've mentioned, it's years and years that and this is coming through the DNA. This is generational. This is epigenetic. Thoughts are real. You can't push them down. They have a volcanic nature. And at some point, they will explode. So we are seeing the pain of generations exploding. And we are in you two both being IT gurus, literally. This is actually an ideal age that we live in to spread this, to keep this thing alive. We have a distinct advantage in this time now to make a difference, because there is a shift. Culturally, there is a shift in awareness with the younger generation. There's a definite change. There's much more of an awareness, but there's also the opportunity to keep it alive, to keep the flame burning like the Olympic flame keeps burning. We also can use the COVID example. How quickly did the pandemic take over the world, and the whole of humanity for the first time in history were globally facing the same common enemy over literally within a few days. So if we can take the virus as an example, how quickly all of humanity had this focus on one issue, why can we not do the same thing with this? It's in our consciousness. We can just as quickly make people aware and work towards solutions in exactly the same way that we're working towards solutions to solve the COVID crisis. This is a crisis that has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of history that we can change if we keep it. So we need to keep this thing going like the virus, to change it, to find the solution, the antibody, the way through. I have to bring science in. I'm sorry, boys. You know that.
It's okay.
The way my brain goes. But I mean, it's true between technology and the concept of the virus. We've seen evidence that overnight you can get global attention on something. Overnight you can get all of humanity focused on something and work towards solutions. How do we leverage that?
Do you want to? No,
I'm just throwing it out to you.
No, I think one thing that I feel is important is to not be reactionary, to be honest, because I feel like when we're in an environment where we're reactionary, we're not putting our best foot forward, because the situation that we're reacting to has the first move advantage already. And so I think one of the reasons that movements like the Civil Rights Movement, and the movement of nonviolence and civil disobedience was so successful is because in that time period, obviously black men were dying all over, just like they are now. But they didn't say, "Oh, a black man died. This is horrible. We need to go protest it." They took a step back and said, "Okay, this is happening. This is not just a flashpoint that just happened last week. This is happening all the time. It's a continuum of racism and violence.
It's a pattern."
Yeah, it's a pattern, and it's a constant thing. Instead of trying to pick at one thing or another, instead of trying to respond to one act of violence or another, let's focus on systemic situations, and let's have the first mover advantage, which is what they did with the SCLC and their coalition of religious leaders who decided, okay, we're going to put our bodies on the line, and instead of us being triggered by the police, we're going to trigger them. We're going to plan these protests not right after somebody got attacked, but we're going to plan them on our time, on our grounds, and we're going to go out and force the police to respond to us in a way that makes it abundantly clear that we are in the right. So when they did that, and everybody, even if you weren't alive at that time, we've seen in school the pictures of police with fire hoses and dogs beating up peaceful protesters. It was impossible to ignore what was happening, and that's what allowed the segregation to really become so unpopular that even the KKK didn't want to do it anymore. So that's just the thought that I've had for a while of like, how can we, instead of always be reactionary, which it's hard to be organized when you're reactionary, but when you create a plan that's based on the situation and then execute that plan, then the other side has to react, and they are more likely to wither and fall because they can't withstand that.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So what you're talking about is being proactive, and proactively keeping this, not just waiting for this to die down and these protests to die down, and then we do nothing until the next explosion. And then there's another.
Well, that's what I'm afraid of. And that's what I'm afraid of is, I mean, I hope that, the riots and the looting, calm down. I mean, like most people, but as far as the peaceful protests, I wouldn't be surprised if those calm down too. And frankly, we go back into the situation where, so-called allies are more focused on, Dancing with the Stars or what the latest pop star is doing again, So that's why I feel like that we have to reorient our mindset into how we deal with this situation and make it be a proactive instead of reactive thing.
I love that. I love that you say that we should have planned peaceful protests. We should follow the models that have worked, and we need to keep it in the public conscious mind constantly so that this doesn't keep continuing. You have to keep those same patterns, proactive patterns running.
Yeah. And the idea that, I think we're supposed to defeat the idea that it's not just, there's this common idea about people who don't understand the Black experience that, it's just, there's a few bad cops, a bad apple did this. He got arrested, he got fired, he, whatever, the problem solved, I'm certainly glad that in very quick time compared to other cases that the old officer's been fired and the one officer has been charged with murder. That's great. But that's not that's not the solution. That's why people are still protesting.
Exactly.
And people are taking that to a much more violent level because that's not what we're here for.
It's a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid on a wound that is still festering. We've got to address the cause of the wound.
It really is. It really is. So that's my thought on that.
And both of you have written incredible blogs. I've actually got them printed out here because I wanted to make some comments and ask some questions about them. But I recommend that all the viewers go to my website, drleaf.com, and go and look at the blogs that both Jay and Ellie have written. They are amazing. And I wanted to actually ask you some questions about, some of the things that you've both said in your blogs. But before we do, Jay, did you want to say anything in terms of the proactive idea or anything in terms of what Ellie's just said?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I wanted to say, and I want to take my time with this so I say it correctly, is, when everything first started, when it came to the protests, which turned into, very aggressive, sometimes violent protests, which sort of evolved into looting. And now, we've got the police sort of, fighting back essentially when it comes to protesters was, I had the same reaction, which was, there's no way that we're going to solve this problem if we are out here breaking things down and looting and doing, this, and that. That's not the way, And then it was through sort of continuing to see the posts, where you got, to get the reasoning why that I started to open my mind up a bit. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating for that type of behavior on a regular basis. What I am trying to say is I understand why it is people have gotten so upset. I understand how things could escalate to that. And then if you look at other nations, other cultures, other countries, I mean, we all love going to Paris and in France. And when the people there want to get something done, they protest. And things, windows get broken, some stores may get vandalized and things get taken, and the government pays attention. And they make a change, because it appears, of course, there's a civil way to go about doing all things, but there's a certain time where, sitting down and having a meeting and waiting for someone to take what you're saying, seriously, it feels like it's hitting deaf ears, and it feels like it's taking too long. So, what's the quickest way to get a bunch of people's attention when you're in a room, break something? Everyone's going to turn around to see what the heck happened. So I understand it, is what I will say. But I do think in the long run, things are going to happen twofold. I agree with Ellie. What we do is, as a Black community and as allies of the Black community, people of color, is going to be to remain consistent and organized. Listen, there are a lot of us who became overnight activists when it came to this specific issue, where we hadn't been speaking about this. And I think we all three, we've lived our lives and done what we could, and we feel like we've been good people, but we certainly weren't posting about this issue, which was absolutely going on beforehand.
Exactly.
And I think that's a fair assessment. I judge myself against the exact same thing.
Exactly.
Because part of it is out of sight, out of mind. And the other part is what I went back to saying before was, I want to live a good life. Like I want to be happy. And do I personally feel like I want to become a lifelong activist? And I don't know if I have that answer. But I do think if this problem is going to be solved, it's going to have to remain at the forefront of people's minds and remain consistent. Whether you want to go and have a peaceful protest, whether you want to throw your dollars at a solution, or whether you want to do what we're doing right now by having those conversations with people, so they can become more aware of your mindset and become allies, or just become aware, so when there are situations they understand a bit more. That's what we can do. So I think the solution to this is not going to happen overnight. When these protests end, and they will at some point, and we go back to our lives, there will still be an issue with prejudice and discrimination and injustice in the United States and in the world. So I think, really what we're going to have to do is make a plan long term. But what I am happy about is I have friends and colleagues who simply are telling me that they had no idea that this was my experience after they read my article. I'm sure the same thing will happen to Ellie if it has not with his article. And just making people aware, so when they look at a situation, through the glasses that they've been wearing their entire life, that they can look at it and go, well, maybe this is not what his experience is. Perhaps that can be a start for them to sort of make a change in the future. So that's what I'm hopeful for, at least. But it'll take much more than that, and I don't want anyone to sort of quote me and saying like, let's just wait and be slow about it. But I definitely think it's going to be a long-term process.
Well, any change starts, and we all know that. Change is small little steps at a time, but cumulatively over time, huge differences can happen. And just from a scientific angle, I can tell you that even in a 3-week period, you can make major changes in your brain. So we could, I right now, I'm going to throw a challenge out there to all my white friends and family and whoever's white out there. I'm going to put up a whole series of educational posts teaching people how to dig down into your unconscious mind and to actually do the hard work of seeing what non-conscious racist thoughts and patterns you actually have, and pulling those to the surface and doing the hard work of dismantling them and actually reconceptualizing them into the right way of thinking. This applies to all the work that I do with mental health. This is a toxic mindset. Racism is a toxic mindset, and it is causing brain damage. So if you've got that inside of you and you think you're not racist, but you're white, you are privileged, and you may not be consciously racist, but you are white. So you can walk into a store and like Jeffrey and Jay walked into a store, and Jeffrey's white and Jay's black, and they looked at Jay. That is a mindset that we have to dismantle. We have to pull that up, and we have to do that hard work. And and white privilege, we don't want to do that. It's time for us to start doing that. So I'm going to put a challenge out there. I'm going to give you the tools to be able to do that. Everything I teach on my page is about dealing with our toxic issues, dealing with our trauma. And this is a toxic trauma. And let me tell you from a scientist point of view, and I do this research, I'm a brain scientist, that when we have a toxic thought, we are damaging our brain. So us not dealing with this stuff is actually causing a toxic damage in our brain. You can't sit on the bylines. You either are anti-racism or you are for racism. So if you're not doing anything anti this toxic mindset, you actually have a toxic damaged brain because you're just sitting on the fence. You can't be a bystander. That is causing brain damage. So don't think you're not affected. Every person who is not operating as a decent human being, reaching out there and valuing every human for who they are and not seeing differences of value judgment, you are causing brain damage in your brain. And this is not acceptable. This is not something that we can keep on perpetuating through the generations. This is something that we can proactively do. And that's something within 3 weeks I've shown with my research and neuroplasticity, and there's many other areas, scientists that research in this field of neuroplasticity. But you can change a mindset. And when we change our mindsets, if you do collectively, if there's thousands of us, and I challenge you, I have thousands of people that are listening to this and watching this now. We can get this video going viral. I challenge the thousands to become hundreds of thousands, to become millions, to change your mindsets. Because as we change our mindsets collectively, as we do the work, we come together and then we can have these discussions. But we don't have to wait, oh, this is such a hopeless thing. You can start today by starting to change your mind. You can start today by starting to listen to the stories. You can go and read Ellie and Jay's blog. You can go and see what's going on out there in social media. You can dig down deep. If you're defensive, if you're feeling defensive, if you're feeling that you have to justify what you're hearing now and getting angry with what I'm saying, just the mere fact that you're justifying shows you that you've got some sort of issue there that you need to deal with. We're talking about human lives here. My son-in-laws walk into a shop and they get targeted. That is not acceptable. That is something that is sick in society. And we can change that. We don't, on top of all the other big changes that will be made, it starts first with a thought. Whatever a person is doing, whatever action they're performing, whatever glance they throw in the direction of my son-in-laws has come from a thought that they have first built, that has come from a thinking process that has been built through the culture and the environment. And when we look at ourselves individually, we can start changing that. So that's my challenge to all of you out there, and we will help you through this challenge. I don't know if you boys want to comment on what I've just said.
Yeah, I just want to say, no, I totally agree with that. And one thing I was thinking of is, one of my hobbies and passions is sailing, which is, ironically something that only mostly white people do. But the bottom line is that, I really understand more and more about your analysis of the brain, and it does seem to me like it is a sailing ship in that you're out on the ocean. You're always moving somewhere. Your brain's always changing. There's no always. You can't drop anchor in the middle of the ocean. Your brain's going one direction, it's going another. And when it comes to this issue of racism, there is no neutral ground. There is no anchor. If you're at the helm, you can't not be at the helm. You can't say, oh, I'm not racist. But if you're not directing your ship towards or against racism, then your ship's going to drift. And it's gonna end up in an environment where you can call it apathy or ignorance or whatever. It's still supporting racism. Mm-hmm. So we could non-consciously support it. And that's not to say I'm not, and I don't want this message to be seen like, oh well, look, white people should feel guilty for being white. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely wrong.
That's a value judgment too.
Or like this is all your fault. It's just being conscious of who you are and how the world is operating. Be conscious and dig deep into yourself to understand how you can do better. And the same thing for me as well, because to be honest, no matter what skin color you are, you can have biases against people. You can have biases against yourself, against your own skin color. And sometimes, I make prejudgments against people because they, look like they might be, the stereotypical thug, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And so I have to change that on myself to respect people and actually try to understand them before I make a value judgment. So I think that's something we can all learn from, no matter what color you are.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. Jay, you want to say anything?
I think I would just say, Prejudice is something that is going to exist forever. I mean, you look at something and you will make a judgment on it. It's how we operate in the world. It's how we sort of, try to make sense of the world around us at all times. I think it's what we do in those moments when we're making quick judgments that are going to have an impact on how others are treated and how others feel in the world. And I think that's a hard thing to do, because the first thing that you need to do as an individual is look internally and say to yourself, what are the areas in which I'm making quick assumptions about? What are the areas in which I assume someone's behavior when I don't have any personal experience on it or with this type of individual? I can't tell you the number of times that I became the exception to the rule for people whose family had never had a Black person in their house before, or who had a Black friend before. And then their whole entire world opened up when it came to that, and it's sad to say that, those are the sort of things that need to happen, but I feel like people need to expand their horizons and their minds and go and experience and get to know the fact that, folks, aren't exactly what you think what they are in their mind. Another example, I went to prom with a girl whose grandfather was extremely racist. She told me ahead of time, and, everything that happened thereafter, was a clear indicator. I took her to her prom, and he wouldn't get out of the car when we were taking photos with the group of, I think, 30 other people. When the pictures went up, she told me that he cut out my portion of the picture and covered out with another frame. Yeah, and that's just something that as I was 16 at the time that I just had to sort of deal with. But there was one day where he came over her house while I was there, and she asked me if I wanted to leave, and I just didn't feel like it. And he came in and we had a conversation, and I think we talked about sports, of which I know nothing about. And, we had a civil conversation, and then I ran into him again and we had a civil conversation. And then, after a while we were having friendly conversations, and it was fine. So I think it works. It works both ways. I became the exception to the rule for him. Because not only I wasn't looking at him as an immediate aggressor who I needed to sort of prove a point to, and he eventually, wore down his preconceived notions about who I was based off of the color of my skin. Now, every situation isn't going to be like that. But what I am saying is that it is proof that if you put yourself in situations, your mind may change about an individual in the end.
I love that. So what you said there was key was the conversation. So once you'd gone past the bias of the color and you got into conversation, it changed things. So this is the importance of conversation, because if you haven't had, how many times, as you already said earlier as well, do we make an assumption about someone, then we talk to them and realize, oh my gosh, I was so wrong, and so that's what we need. That's another pattern that we can bring in to continue this. Once things calm down, is we could have conversation challenges where we get people talking all kinds of ways and manners of getting conversations going between different races that are sit and have a coffee, community, whatever, the coffee conversation, whatever, as well as the protests that are peaceful. So there are some very basic things that can be done besides working on our own mind, conversations, peaceful protests. These can make a difference, and they're doable.
Yeah. In respect. Out of respecting each other, respecting the fact that someone else may have a completely different opinion, and hearing them out and being open to the fact that you just possibly may be wrong or misguided in your thought, or that simply may just be their experience, and sort of going from there. I think it takes a very brave person to sit in the room. I don't know how many Black people would be willing to sit in a room full of people who identify as racist. And I don't know how many, white people who have inherent biases against people of color, or Black people, would feel comfortable, one, identifying that they were those people to begin with, and then two, sitting in the room with those individuals and having a meeting of the minds. I think it takes a special type of person, but those are the types of people that we need to make this conversation happen.
And we can have this. Go ahead.
Oh no, that's a really cool story you just told, and obviously I had no idea about that either. But you're absolutely right. It takes that willingness to be uncomfortable and for a good cause. And, whether it is standing up, picketing, or whether it is talking to someone who already has a preconceived notion that you're lower than them. I mean, that's just really cool that you did that. And you said, even as a teenager, no, I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to try to get to know him, know me. And it just reminds me of a story that I think everybody should look up, which is this Black man called Darrell Davis, who's now become well known for attending KKK rallies and befriending these racist members. And and up to 2017, he convinced over 200 KKK members to get the ropes just by talking to them, getting to know them, befriending them, showing them that he's not the enemy. He's made so much change as a one person. So, and I think we all have that potential to make a difference by being willing to be uncomfortable, have uncomfortable conversations,
Yeah, and I just want to throw in 2 points.
Go.
We're going
No, please. This is amazing. This is amazing. Go.
I think 2 things, because the first thing that someone, I'm sure, who heard my story and heard what you just said is going to say is, it's not my responsibility to make someone who has a prejudice against me more comfortable with me being around them. Mm-hmm. And that is a valid point to make. Why is it my job to have to do that? Someone should be able to, meet me halfway, or simply just not have those thoughts at all. And that's also a valid point. All I'm saying is, if you are an individual who is willing enough to take that step, that is one single path in which the conversation could start. An alternate path could be being in the position of the person who has the biases, and making your own self uncomfortable and challenging your own beliefs about individuals who may have prejudices about, and making the effort and doing the work as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because I know if I was listening to this, I would say, well, hell, it's not my job. So yeah.
And you've raised 2 very valid points. We can do the work ourselves, and yes, it may not be our job, but as humans, we need to start talking. We need to have conversations. And I think that if what may make it easier to have a conversation when you think, hey, it's not my job to convince you. No, it's not your job to convince you and to have expectations. I agree with what you were saying then, how people will feel that. But at the same time is, if we agree to disagree, but we have a conversation about agreeing to disagree and finding, but there's probably something we can agree on. So we're not coming in, I'm not trying to convince you, you're not trying to convince me. I just see you as another human. Can we see each other as humans and have a conversation? Then there's, what you choose to do with that afterwards is entirely up to you. You can walk away more racist or less racist, or more angry or less angry. But at the end of the day, it's a choice that you have to make, bearing in mind that if you are constantly angry towards other people, even if they don't change, that anger that you keep in you is damaging you. So it's damaging the victim and the victimized in that situation. So we could literally start a challenge of have a conversation. Get uncomfortable. Be prepared to agree to disagree. We could get a campaign going where people communicate and start talking.
Yeah,
but I feel like
combos.
Yeah, me too, for sure. And I feel like it's something that I've thought about for a long time, to be honest. So I'm glad that you guys are bringing it up. So essential to peace and unity. And it just reminds me of the fact that this goes back to, what it means to be human, and what it means to be, to make progress in your own mind and your own spirit, in terms of what you've shared with your audience regarding how they change their mind, or how they change themselves physically and health-wise. It requires you to be uncomfortable. So that, almost any triumph requires you to be uncomfortable. But then once you get to the other side, you're so glad you did it. Just like, we were talking about, Wim Hof and that method, all of that, you have to just breathe in all that. And at first it's kind of weird at first, and you feel like you're out of place, uncomfortable. But then, you get over that hump and you're like, I achieved something out of this. This is awesome. Let me do it again. So I mean, I'm sure for Jay, when he, reason he's told the story is because something good came out of it. And that's why we're all here, right? We want something good to come out of the difficult times that we have with each other.
I love that. And we need to, it's like another analogy is a surgeon. I've got so many surgeon friends, and they always say to me, you have to cut you up to fix you. So you have to go through the pain to cut you up, fix you up, and then you've got to go through the healing. And what we've created is a culture of, I don't want to feel pain. Just take a tablet, take it away, push it down. And then things keep hidden. And then when things are hidden, that's the societal breakdown as well. It's not just in racism, it's in mental health in general. It's just You got to get a label, get a drug, and push it away. But it's all part of being a human. We've got to embrace depression and anxiety and the mental health things that come. I mean, that's depressing what you both have experienced. It's anxiety provoking what you've experienced. To have someone who doesn't want you in their home, or someone who's driving behind you, or someone who looks at you funny because of your color of your skin, that creates a level of anxiety. But if we're talking about it, as you say, if we go through the pain, if we do that surgery, we'll get through the other side, we'll get through the healing. So what we have to do is keep the pain in the forefront. We have to keep the pain in the forefront.
Yeah. I think a challenge that I would love to sort of get to people who are looking at, the protests and the things that are happening in the world right now, and they're going, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe these people, these thugs or whatnot are doing these things out in the streets. Think of something that would happen in your life that would bring you to a point that would make you angry enough where you would want to break something. Okay. If you lost a loved one, or if you felt as though, some injustice had, sort of befallen you or someone that you love, and there was nothing that you could possibly do to change that, and what happened was sort of irreversible. Think of that and try and understand, just like we just mentioned, what would bring someone out there to do these exact same things? What would bring you to sort of break a glass, or go and challenge a police officer, or go and shout at the top of your lungs that injustice was happening and change needed to happen now? I think that would be the challenge that I would throw out to people. Because if you think about it like that, you think, okay, if it could be me in any scenario, and for me, the things that, would always bring me up in arms would be if something happened to my husband, or if something happened to my mom, or my family. What are the things that would sort of drive me up to mania? And those would be the things. So I understand. And I really sort of implore people to do the same thing. And just sort of to go back to what Ellie said about the individual who was, went to KKK rallies. I think we all must realize, and this sounds incredibly cheesy, that like at our core, we all just want to live a good life. We all just want to pay our bills and go on a vacation, have food on the table, laugh with our loved ones, and live a good life. I think no matter what, socioeconomic background you come from, no matter what color of your skin, you just want to live a good life. And I think that's why it's so easy to find commonality with people of any race or kind. So once you take away these invisible make-believe barriers that you feel as though separate you from another person, even your traumas, which may be very real and very concrete, you will find at the core that we are very similar. So I feel like if you challenge yourself to put yourself in a position where you can have these conversations and be a little uncomfortable and get a little scraped up, like you mentioned, Dr. Lee, then, what's going to come out of it is like, oh, like these people are way more common to me than I thought.
You could call me mom.
Finally, I wasn't sure this whole time. I wasn't sure.
That was amazing. What both of you just said, two separate conversations was two separate points that you've made is so important, because you're stressing the two things. You're stressing empathy, which is so much part of our humanity. And from, once again, brain science research, we have not got wiring in our brain for hatred. There's no wiring in our brain for racism, for toxic. We're literally wired for love. All our neurotransmitters, our circuits, we gear towards empathy and towards love. So when we operate, that's what, as you say, that's our most fundamental need as humans. Is every movie, every story, it's always about the love at the end of the day, the love story that breaks through the trauma, that's what really draws us in. So it's true. We have to, we all know that. It's not brain science. We all know that. And so to empathize, to develop our empathy, we kind of have stamped out a little bit of empathy is natural, but our individualistic lifestyles and our almost narcissistic lifestyles have kind of stamped that out, where we're not putting ourselves in other people's shoes. And interesting research shows that when you're in a bad place, like racism has put Black people in a bad place, reaching out and trying to have these conversations like you did with your prom partner's grandfather. Okay. Yeah. Prom date's grandfather, was you going in your place of almost brokenness, you reached out. And research shows that when you reach out from a place of brokenness and you help others, you improve your own healing and functionality by up to 68%. So if we have us all doing the mind work, it's the mind, your decision to do what you did that day, to do what you've done, it's all driven initially by what are you thinking, it's driven by the thoughts that you're thinking. So if we get our minds changed, we can start changing how we move forward with those things. So empathy is a huge part of it, and take away those invisible barriers. So I love what you both said. I mean, just everything is just incredible.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One real quick thing. One thing that I do think that I've really loved, what I've seen the last few days is, aside from all the videos of police attacking protesters and rioters attacking police, there have been the videos of protesters coming up to the police line and asking the police to kneel.
Yes.
Saying, hey, look, having personal conversations with the police or whoever the head is there and saying, hey, we will kneel if you will kneel. If you kneel, police, we will actually go home. And that's happened in multiple cities where police have actually gotten down on their knee on the line with the protesters, and then the protesters went home.
Amazing.
I mean, in the midst of all this craziness, there's that beauty that can be replicated and set as an example of how to treat each other. And I think that that's something we can hold on to and possibly use as a driving force for real change, for understanding each other, and for bringing peace.
I love that. That's incredible. Well, there's so much more we can discuss, but I would like to raise something that I think is a very relevant topic, and you've both kind of touched on it in your blogs. But why do we have to focus at this time on Black Lives Matter? We all agree that all lives matter. Our whole conversation has been also referring to the fact that obviously every human, love, etc., and connection, and take away those invisible barriers, and honoring and respecting all the different colors, and bias goes both ways, and opportunists occur in every culture. That's not the issue. The issue this time is Black Lives Matter. The best analogy I heard this week, and then I'm going to hand it over to you, and there's been so many, the one I'd like that helped me understand it the best or explain it the best was if there's a fire in the street and the fire engine comes along, because one of the houses is on fire, the fire engine comes along and puts the fire out on that house. It doesn't mean that all the other houses don't matter, but it means that at that moment, that house is on fire. And that's what we have at the moment. At this moment, Black lives are on fire. And we have to focus on that. And then we can, as the other houses come on fire, we can deal with those. But at this moment now, we need to deal with a house that's been on fire for too long. And it's time to put that fire out.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I was going to use an analogy as well that I sort of more identify with. Everyone at some point in their lives have been to the emergency room. And when you go to the emergency room, everyone is there because they have an issue, right? Maybe you have a toothache, or you've got a temperature, your arm's in a cast, and there's some sort of issue. You are in need as well. Everyone there is in a need at the moment. But then someone comes, busts in the door, and they're bleeding and they collapse on the ground. And then you see the people from behind the emergency room rush out and take them back. All of a sudden, you who've been sitting in line for 2 hours now, they're skipping ahead of you. That is what I think about when I think of this issue. It is an emergent issue. And it is something that everyone needs to pay attention to. It's not negating the fact that you too may have problems. We all have problems. We all have things that we have to deal with. This is a serious issue that is not being solved, that needs immediate attention from people. So yes, absolutely, Black Lives Matter. And we say it because we feel as though they have not been honored in the way that they should be, in the way that other lives have been. And it's an emergent crisis.
Okay, that's my new favorite analogy. That's an excellent analogy.
It's a great one. It's a great one.
Yeah, that really, really hones in on the issue.
Yeah, I think that the semantics of that has been really overplayed and to the detriment of us all. But specifically, all lives matter. We all agree that all lives matter. This is so ridiculous to have a debate about that. We don't even need to talk about that. It's talking about, like both of you just said, what's the emergent issue. And I do feel like, one group that's having a lot of challenges is the Christian community.
Yeah.
They, for a lot of them, they don't understand what many Black people have to deal with, especially in the evangelical community and, communities that are predominantly white. They think, look, we love, God is love and we love all of you. So why you hate us? Why are you attacking? Why are you doing all this? or why should we focus on Black Lives Matter? We thought everything's cool. But I think even in the Christian faith, there's specific examples that reflect what the concept that of focusing on the Black struggle. And I know some of them that we've discussed recently were, the parables of Jesus, losing one sheep out of 100, or the parable of, a shepherd losing one sheep out of 100. He spends all day and all night finding that sheep.
Yeah.
And when he finds it, he's like the happiest man in the world. Or the prodigal son, where the son goes away, gets involved in all sorts of stuff, and basically almost dies, and then comes back years later, and the father is so happy, so cheerful, throws a party for this kid who went and ruined his life, and the son who stayed home and did everything he was told and was so great. It's so upset and feels so jealous. It's this, but it's not about, we need to focus on where the problem is.
It's so good.
Identify the problem. Let's solve it together.
I agree with you. And in terms of the church, the church needs to wake up and also read the history, the structural racism that's actually wired into a lot of the church history in the United States and across the world. But there's some really, really good books out there that will explain there's a lot wrong that has just come through and been accepted and not questioned. So.
Yeah, I mean, for example, everybody lionizes Martin Luther King now, but back when he was doing his thing, most churches were opposed to him. Even many Black churches did not want to be involved in civil disobedience. And, the White churches were on the other side of that many times. So the idea that somehow, I believe in God, so that means I'm righteous is complete garbage. Look in yourself, realize, are you really doing what's right? Are you really embracing the fullness of what that is? And and does that mean, and sometimes that means going outside of yourself and seeing people who are different than you, and being what the real example of what good Samaritan really is.
Exactly. What does love look like? That's a question we've got to ask ourselves. What does love look like? Not rules and marginalizing people and if someone is suffering pain emotionally and physically from a belief system that you have, there's something wrong with your belief system. We need to question those foundations of that kind of belief system, because God is love. So that's a really, really good point. Ellie, you also, I want you just to give a couple of those stats from your blog, if you don't mind. You it's amazing. We were discussing this over the weekend, and you put this in your blog about the recent Stanford study. And can you pick up on just a couple of those stats? Because
it's just funny. It's just okay. So real briefly,
it's just great. Yeah.
Well, just in response to everything that's going on, we're talking about writing a blog post. I'm like, what am I going to write about? I was just so stressed out about everything, and then I just thought about, let me.
Now your mother-in-law asked you for a blog.
Yeah, I was like, I got to dig deeper into this if we're going to find something that I can really get passionate about. And that's when I discovered, okay, everybody talks about, Black people are being targeted by police. Is that a real thing or is that not? Is it just perception or is it reality? Is it because, Black people are more likely to commit crime, which is what a lot of conservatives say, honestly, or is there something actually substantial to that? And then I just did some simple Google search and found these studies that are showing, yes, Black people on average are more likely to get stopped for traffic violations than white people. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's really happening. But even inside those studies, it's showing that when white people are searched, they're more likely to have illegal drugs, weapons, and contraband on them than the Black people. So when you're talking about trying to stop crime, it makes no sense for the statistics to be what they are. But that's the way they are. And that's the evidence that explains why so many Black people feel like they have been harassed their entire lives, because it actually did happen.
So, and then talk about the traffic fines, how these quotas. I mean, it's unreal.
In some police departments, there are quotas, which is like I mentioned earlier with stop and frisk. But in some police departments, there are quotas, whether they're specifically, you need to get a certain amount of tickets or you need to get a certain amount of fines. There's performance incentives, because quotas is too political. There's performance incentives around a lot of policing, and there's no doubt about that. And even without those incentives, there's still the financial benefit to a lot of cities and towns and counties to get all of that traffic money in. All of those violations for such simple stuff like not using your turn signal or crossing over a double yellow line. and you pay $100, $200, $300 fines. Well, if you're a poor Black person, you can't pay those fines.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to end up having to, either accept the payment plan or, see the fines increase every month, or, get an arrest warrant. Like the guy, like I mentioned, the guy from Lando Castile, one of these, that was a Black man who died. Multiple times he got arrested for having a suspended license.
49 times, wasn't it? 49 times.
49 times he was pulled over in 13 years. Many of those times he was pulled over and cited was not that he was doing anything wrong. It's because he had a suspended license for something else that happened months ago. Or he had a warrant out for his arrest. It's like, oh, was he a criminal? What did he do? Oh, yeah, he drove around with tinted windows. So the police cited him and he didn't fix it in time. And so now there's a warrant out for his arrest. What the hell are we doing arresting people for because they didn't pay a traffic fine? This is ridiculous.
When they've got a broken tail light and they haven't got the money to fix it, and they get nuts.
It's ridiculous. So I'm like, maybe we should dig deeper I wanted to try and find some substance that people could appreciate and actually respect, even if they have not experienced this for themselves, and so and help them realize it's not just one tragedy, it's a statistic, and a statistic that really matters.
It really does. And Ellie just honed in on a couple of things. And there's if you dig deep enough, there's some incredibly good books, and we've been putting up posts, and we will keep putting up posts of books that you can read to educate yourself, to understand. And you can there's Google. You can Google and you can find out what's really going on and get the facts. So, we've got to be there's a lot, I see a lot of comments and I'll say this on my social media, of people that are making comments, but they don't have the facts. So until you don't shoot your mouth off. Don't be reactive. The first 30 to 90 seconds that you hear something or read something, your brain is not functioning like it should, because it's trying to process this information in an energy wave, and there's a whole chemical reaction, and you're more than likely not going to access wisdom, and you're going to make a wrong decision. So don't shoot a comment on social media or say something until you've actually calmed down enough, and then you'll have the wisdom to get the facts. So before you just write something or say something, get the facts. That's a good conversation. Before you in a conversation with someone like both of you guys have been suggesting, get into conversations before you just react and get defensive, and listen, be quiet. Hear everything the other person's going to say. Don't just immediately defend yourself. If you feel the need to defend, and I said it earlier and I'll say it again, because I've done it myself in various different circumstances, not when all kinds of things. My kids will say something, or my husband will say something, and I feel the need to defend myself. If I feel the need to immediately be defensive, I've got to check why. And I may have a justified reason, but I need to check why first. So get the facts, check your reactions, don't just shoot from the hip. And that way we can be much calmer and have these conversations that we need to have. You guys have been outstanding. I'm so proud of you. I love you both so much. And I want to announce to the world how proud I am that you are my son-in-laws, that I'm intensely proud of you, that I have such high regard for you both. I think you're both absolutely brilliant. And I have learned so much. You've enriched our family. You've enriched my children's lives, Jeffrey and Jessica, and all of our lives. You mean the world to us. And I want to thank you for that. I want to honor you both and thank you for doing this very hard conversation. It's not easy to have this kind of conversation. But I don't believe it will be the last. I want to invite you back again, and I have all kinds of plans, and I think you both know me well. When I get plans, and Jessica and Dominique, then lots of things are going to start happening. So I just want to thank you both. And before we go, is there something that each of you would like to maybe just say in closing? A pearl of wisdom?
Something I'll just say, I guess I'll just go ahead, one thing that I really appreciated about you, Caroline, when I got to know you, is in your teachings, you're always about fear versus love, and how fear is so destructive and love is so creative. And I see that in this situation as well, is that the fear is really destroying us. It's destroying police officers when they pull someone over. It's destroying the people who get pulled over because they're Black. And it's destroying people when they're trying to figure out how I'm going to respond to this crisis that we're experiencing right now. But at the same time, the love can also come in that environment and overcome the crisis that we're experiencing, and actually give people a good reason to cry, to be honest. So, I would just encourage people, as they're trying to go about their day, like, how can they show more love how can they respond with love to these situations, especially towards people who they have not seen as their peers? Whether you think about how Jesus Christ lived, we think about how Martin Luther King lived, or Muhammad Gandhi. How can we bring more love to accomplish the goals that we want to see in our world?
I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you, Ellie. Jay.
Yeah. I think what I'd like to say, for the people who are watching this right now, if you've made it all the way to the end, and you haven't turned it off because we've gone on, I imagine that there are going to be people, be they white or black or a person of color, who disagree with some, if not everything that we've said in this conversation. What I will say to those people is, there must be a reason why we've spent this amount of time to talk about these things. There are people out on the streets who are willing to risk their own safety to make their voice heard and make something known. I would challenge someone watching this to think for themselves why that might be. And even if you don't see the logic or it makes absolutely no sense to you, to try and dig deep down and understand a scenario, like I mentioned before, that would sort of bring you to this very same place. And just do your homework. There are a ton of resources out on the net right now. Some of them may seem like complete, the fabrication and lies based off of your personal experience, but they're true to someone. They're true to someone's life. And there are many people out there who are showing you that it's true to them, or they identify it with it as well. So my challenge would just be to open up your mind, because in my promise, and I'm sure all of our promises are, that we will do the same, to have a meeting of the minds and be open to having a conversation and solving as much as we can. And then conversely, there are probably people of color, Black people who are watching this, and they don't think that we are being harsh enough or militant enough, and that we need to do more, and we can't go about this in a peaceful way. And to that, I would say the exact same thing.
Absolutely brilliant, both of you. Thank you. This is incredible. I want to encourage you all to share this video. Share this. It's on YouTube. It's on podcast as well. Share this. Get this word out. Watch this space, because we will be back with a lot more information and to help you. Those challenges I've put out there in the beginning about changing us, getting in our heads and changing our unconscious mindsets. These are real. We're going to think of a whole lot of ideas that we can keep this in the conscious mindset. This is not going to just sink in and go away. This is going to be a focus of the challenge that we as an organization are going to move ahead with. I say that to you as Dr. Leaf. I will continue in this pathway, because this is something that has to be detoxed, and I'm all about detoxing the mind. And I want to thank Ellie and Jay again for your bravery, for your honesty, your vulnerability. I want to encourage you, all of you, to read their blogs. They're amazing. They're on my website. And please, let's just stand together, because together we can change this. We can change it. Remember the COVID example. Overnight, the world was on its knees and aware. We can do this too. Overnight, we can change something that is absolutely breaking society, and it has to stop. Thank you both.
No, thank you.
Thanks. See you, Mom.